Welcome, dear viewers, to another chilling episode filled with suspense and mystery. Black Friday is known for its jaw-dropping deals, endless lines, and shopping chaos. But what if I told you that amidst the bustling crowds and towering shelves, some shoppers and employees have encountered unexplainable, terrifying phenomena? Tonight, we'll uncover 4 haunting tales from Black Friday that will make you think twice about those late-night shopping trips. Are you ready to explore the darker side of retail frenzy? Let's dive in. Story number 1. The Cursed Door. Black Friday always brought out the worst in people. I'd worked retail long enough to know that the doors would open and the customers would pour in like a tidal wave, pushing, shoving, clawing for the best deals. But the year I transferred to the electronics store in New York, I learned that Black Friday wasn't just chaotic. It was cursed. It started with the door. The store had been there for decades, a fixture of the community. But in 2008, something happened that no one liked to talk about. A security guard, David something, had been trampled to death when the crowd forced their way in, shattering the glass doors in their frenzy for discounted TVs. The news had been all over it at the time, but as the years passed, the story faded, except for those who worked there. The first time I heard about the Cursed Door was from Gina, one of the seasoned employees. It was the week leading up to Black Friday, and we were closing up for the night. The store was quiet, the kind of eerie silence that makes every creak of the building sound louder than it should. "You know about the door, right?" she asked as we walked toward the entrance. "What about it?" She stopped, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. "You'll see, on Black Friday, it starts." "Starts what?" She didn't answer, just shook her head and walked away. The night before Black Friday, I was assigned the closing shift. Most of the employees had begged off, claiming everything from sick kids to food poisoning. That left me, Gina, and a couple of other new hires. The store was unusually still, the shelves fully stocked and waiting for the chaos of the next morning. Around midnight, I was walking past the front entrance when I heard it, a faint rattling sound, like someone shaking the door. First, I thought it was just the wind, but when I got closer, the sound grew louder, more insistent. I stopped a few feet away, staring at the glass doors. They were perfectly still, yet the sound continued, a rhythmic rattle, as if someone on the other side was trying to get in. "Hey, Gina," I called out, my voice shaking slightly. "You hearing this?" She appeared behind me, her face tense. "Don't go near it." "What is it?" She glanced at the door, then back at me. "It's him." I laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right?" She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed my arm and pulled me away. "Come on. You don't want to be near that door tonight." We went back to the stockroom, but the sound followed us, or at least, felt like it did. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the faint rattle of the glass, like a memory etched into my skull. By 3 a.m., the store was eerily quiet. Most of the employees were in the back, avoiding the front entrance. I stayed near the registers, telling myself I was just doing my job. But really, I wanted to prove to myself that Gina's story was nonsense. That's when I saw him. He was standing by the door, dressed in a security uniform. His back was to me, his posture rigid. First, I thought it was a real person, one of the new hires. Maybe, but as I stepped closer, I realized something was wrong. The air around him was cold, colder than the rest of the store. I could see my breath fogging in front of me, even though the heaters were on full blast. And then there was the smell, something metallic and sharp, like blood and rust. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. He didn't move. I took another step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure remained still, his hands at his sides. It wasn't until I was just a few feet away that I noticed the reflection in the glass. There wasn't one. The door was clear, showing the empty parking lot beyond. But the man cast no reflection. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled backward. That's when he turned. His face, or what was left of it, was pale and bloated, his eyes sunken and lifeless. His mouth hung open, as if he were trying to scream, but no sound came out. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, then raised a hand and pointed toward the parking lot. "Get out," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the stockroom, where Gina and the others were huddled together, their faces pale. "You saw him, didn't you?" she asked. I nodded, too shaken to speak. "He's been here every year since it happened," Gina said quietly. "Same time, same place. He watches the door, like he's waiting for the crowd to come back. Why? No one knows. Maybe he's angry, maybe he's trapped. But he's not the only thing that happens on Black Friday." The next morning, the store was chaos. Shoppers poured in as soon as the doors opened, pushing and shoving their way toward the deals. I stayed in the back, stacking boxes, trying to avoid the front entrance. Around noon, I heard it again, the rattling. It was louder this time, more aggressive, like someone pounding on the glass. I peeked out from the stockroom, and my stomach dropped. The doors were shaking violently, even though no one was near them. Customers walked by without noticing, their eyes fixed on the shelves. But the glass vibrated as if it might shatter at any moment. And then, just for a second, I saw him again, the security guard. He was standing outside this time, his lifeless eyes staring in at the crowd. And behind him, shadows moved, dark and shapeless, flickering in the light of the morning sun. I quit the next day. Gina told me later that the doors had stopped rattling after Black Friday, and the security guard hadn't been seen again, at least, not until the following year. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't work in a place where something like that happened, where the air still felt heavy with his presence. If you ever shop on Black Friday and hear the sound of glass rattling, stop and listen. Look at the doors. You might see him there, watching, waiting. And if you do, don't get too close. He doesn't like to be disturbed. Story number 2. The haunted cart. If you've ever worked retail during Black Friday, you know it's hell. Crowds pushing through the doors, screaming children, shelves stripped bare in minutes. The chaos doesn't stop until the lights go off. And even then, the adrenaline keeps you wired. I'd survived 3 years of it. But Black Friday 2016 at the Superstore in Orlando, Florida, was something else entirely. That night didn't just leave me tired, it left me terrified. It started innocently enough. The store was packed, shoppers fighting over deals in every aisle. I was stationed in the food section, trying to keep the shelves stocked with canned goods and snacks. It was around 8 p.m. when I first noticed the cart. It rolled into my section slowly, its wheels squeaking against the polished floor. First, I thought it belonged to one of the customers. It wasn't uncommon for someone to leave their cart unattended while grabbing something from the shelves. But as I looked around, there was no one nearby. The cart just sat there, empty, at the end of the aisle. I shrugged it off and went back to stocking shelves. But a few minutes later, the squeaking returned. I turned just in time to see the cart glide past me, moving smoothly down the aisle. It wasn't fast, just a slow, deliberate roll, but it wasn't natural either. No one was pushing it. There was no one near it at all. Probably the floor, I muttered to myself, trying to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. Maybe it's uneven. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I watched as the cart came to a stop in front of the bread section. It sat there for a moment, then turned slightly, as if someone were examining the loaves on display. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Other customers noticed too. A woman nearby laughed nervously. "Is someone playing a prank?" "No idea," I said, forcing a smile. "It's probably just the wheels." But as the cart rolled on, heading toward the cereal aisle, the woman frowned. "That's not normal," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like it's looking for something." The cart moved through the aisles with eerie precision, stopping at random shelves as if making selections. A small group of curious customers began to follow it, whispering among themselves. One man, clearly skeptical, stepped forward and grabbed the handle. "Let's see what's going on here," he said, giving it a firm shake. The moment his hand touched the cart, he froze, his face went pale, and his eyes widened in shock. "It's cold," he stammered. "Like freezing. Jesus." He let go quickly, shaking his hand as if trying to get rid of the sensation. "I'm not touching that thing again." The crowd murmured uneasily, and a few people backed away. I should have called security right then, but part of me didn't want to look like an idiot. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe the cart really was just a prank. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. As the night wore on, the cart continued its strange journey, stopping and starting as if guided by an invisible hand. I tried to ignore it, but the whispers from customers kept drawing my attention back. Around 10 p.m., the cart stopped at the entrance to the stockroom. It sat there, still and silent, like it was waiting. By this point, most of the customers had cleared out, and the store was eerily quiet. "I'll deal with it," I told myself, trying to muster some courage. I approached the cart cautiously, my palms sweating. "It's just a cart," I muttered under my breath. "It's just a stupid cart." But as I reached for the handle, the air around it grew cold, not a mild chill bone deep, like stepping into a freezer. My hand hovered inches away, and I swear I felt something, a faint pressure, like a hand brushing against mine. I jerked back, my heart pounding. "Is everything okay?" It was Lisa, one of the night shift managers, her voice breaking the silence. "Yeah," I lied, wiping my hands on my pants. "Just a weird cart. It keeps moving." Lisa frowned, her eyes flicking toward the cart. "That's the one." "Yeah." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I've heard stories about this place. You know, about the stockroom." "What kind of stories?" She glanced around, as if making sure we were alone. "Years ago, before I started here, there was an accident. A worker was bringing in a shipment of heavy boxes. Something went wrong, a cart tipped over, and he was crushed. He died right there, in front of the doors." My stomach dropped. "You're kidding." Lisa shook her head. "They say he's still here, that sometimes you can feel him." Before I could respond, the cart moved. It rolled forward, its wheels squeaking softly, and stopped just inside the stockroom. Lisa and I exchanged a look, neither of us wanting to follow it. "I'm calling security," Lisa said, pulling out her walkie-talkie. "This is too much." She stepped away to make the call, leaving me alone with the cart. I stood there, staring at it, my breath fogging in the cold air. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper, coming from inside the stockroom. It wasn't clear, just a soft murmur, but it sounded like a voice. My chest tightened, and I took a step back. Then the whisper turned into a scream. The sound was deafening, echoing through the stockroom and out into the aisles. I stumbled backward, covering my ears, as the cart jerked violently, its wheels screeching against the floor. The lights overhead flickered, and for a split second, I thought I saw something, a shadowy figure standing behind the cart, its outline hazy and indistinct. "Get out of there," Lisa shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me away. We ran, leaving the cart behind. The scream stopped as suddenly as it had started, and the lights returned to normal. By the time security arrived, the cart was gone. We found it later, sitting in the exact spot where the worker had died all those years ago. No one could explain how it got there, and the camera footage was inconclusive. The cart had moved, yes, but there was no sign of anyone pushing it. After that night, I refused to work Black Friday again. Lisa transferred to another store, and the rest of the staff avoided the stockroom whenever they could. But the stories didn't stop. Every year, on Black Friday, people reported seeing a cart moving on its own, stopping in random aisles, as if searching for something or someone. If you ever find yourself shopping late at night and you see a cart moving without a hand to guide it, don't follow, don't touch it, and whatever you do, don't go into the stockroom. Some things are better left alone. Story number 3. The Man with Red Eyes. Black Friday has always been a kind of ritual for our family. My mom would scour the ads for deals. Dad would complain about the crowds. And my little brother, Jamie, and I would tag along, half asleep but secretly excited to see the chaos unfold. In 2019, we went to one of the biggest malls in Texas, getting there at 4:30 in the morning to secure our place in line. The air was cold and damp, and the parking lot was already packed with people, their faces lit by the glow of their phones. We parked near the back, bundled up against the chill, and walked toward the entrance. That's when I first saw him. He was standing about 30 feet away, near the edge of the crowd, tall and motionless. His long coat brushed the ground, and his wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his face. First, I thought he was just another early bird shopper, but something about him didn't feel right. He wasn't facing the store. He wasn't holding a phone or talking to anyone. He was staring directly at us. "Do you see that guy?" I asked my dad, nudging him. He squinted in the man's direction, probably just cold, standing still to conserve energy. But it didn't look like he was conserving energy. He looked wrong. His stillness wasn't human. It was like he was a mannequin placed there by mistake. Jamie tugged at my sleeve. "Who's that?" he whispered, his voice small. "No idea," I said. "Just stay close." As the minutes ticked by, I kept glancing at the man, hoping he'd move or do something to prove he was normal. But he didn't. He just stood there, the brim of his hat angled toward us. Jamie, being a curious 7-year-old, couldn't resist. "I'm gonna go see," he announced, pulling free from my mom's grasp. "Jamie, no!" I shouted, but he was already running toward the man. The moment Jamie got within 10 feet of him, he stopped dead in his tracks. He stood there, frozen, as if he'd run into an invisible wall. My mom and I bolted after him, and when we reached him, he was trembling, his face pale. "Jamie, what happened?" my mom asked, grabbing his shoulders. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his cheeks. "He doesn't have eyes," Jamie whispered. "Only red, all red." I turned to look at the man, but he was gone. The spot where he'd been standing was empty, as if he'd melted into the crowd. My heart pounded in my chest, and I pulled Jamie close. "Let's get inside," my dad said, his voice tight. Now, the doors hadn't opened yet, but my parents decided we weren't sticking around. We turned and headed back toward the car, Jamie clinging to my mom, his little fists clutching her coat. When we reached the car, we stopped cold. A handprint was smeared across the windshield, huge, easily twice the size of any normal hand, with claw-like fingers that had left faint scratches in the glass. "What the hell is that?" my dad muttered, reaching for his keys. He unlocked the car, but when he turned the ignition, nothing happened. The engine wouldn't even crank. Come on," he muttered, turning the key over and over. The air felt different now, thicker, colder, the kind of cold that bites through your clothes and settles in your bones. I glanced around the parking lot, and that's when I saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the lot, just beyond the glow of the streetlights. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. I could feel his eyes, those red, empty sockets, boring into me. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "He's back." My dad followed my gaze, his jaw tightening. "Everyone, get in the car." We piled in, locking the doors, even though we all knew a locked car door wouldn't stop whatever that thing was. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The man didn't move, didn't come any closer. He just stood there, a shadow at the edge of the lot, his presence heavy and oppressive. Jamie clung to my mom, his small body trembling. "I want to go home," he whimpered. "We will, buddy," my dad said, though his voice didn't sound convincing. He reached for his phone, but when he tried to call for help, the line wouldn't connect. "No service," he muttered, holding the phone up as if that would help. The silence was suffocating. Then, faintly, we heard it, a tap 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 on the roof of the car. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, before anyone could answer. The car shook, as if something heavy had landed on it. Jamie screamed, and my dad threw the car into neutral, trying the ignition again. This time, the engine sputtered to life. "Hold on," he yelled, slamming the car into reverse. The tires screeched as we peeled out of the parking lot, my dad steering with one hand while fumbling for his phone with the other. I glanced out the back window, expecting to see the man standing there, but he was gone. We didn't stop until we reached a gas station several miles away. My dad checked the car for damage while my mom comforted Jamie inside. The handprint on the windshield was still there, the scratches deeper than I'd realized. "Whatever it was," my dad said, his voice low, "we're not going back." We never did. My mom swore off Black Friday shopping after that, and Jamie refused to talk about the man with the red eyes. As for me, I can't stop thinking about it. The way he stared at us, the way he seemed to know where we were, the cold that clung to the air wherever he stood. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about that parking lot. I see the handprint on the glass, hear the tapping on the roof, feel those red eyes watching me. And when I wake up, I swear I can still feel the cold. If you ever find yourself out shopping on Black Friday and see a tall man in a long coat, do yourself a favor, don't look at him. Don't go near him. And whatever you do, don't let your kids run toward him. Some deals aren't worth dying for. Story number 4. The Woman in Black. Black Friday at Walmart is chaos. Shopping carts crashing, customers yelling, and kids crying as they clutch at toys that are always just out of reach. It's a battle, every single year. I should have known better than to pick up a shift that day, but I needed the extra cash. Rent doesn't pay itself, and holidays aren't cheap. By the end of my shift, I was exhausted, my feet sore, and my patience worn thin. But what happened that night, in the toy aisle, is something I'll never forget. I'm not sure I'll ever be the same. Started around 7 p.m., when the crowds were at their peak. The toy aisle was a battlefield. Parents fighting over action figures and dolls. Kids screaming because their favorite toys had been snatched out of their hands. I was stocking shelves, trying to keep up with the frenzy, when I saw her. She was standing at the far end of the aisle, dressed entirely in black. Her coat hung loose around her frame, and her hair was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat that cast her face in shadow. She wasn't shopping, wasn't grabbing at the shelves like everyone else. She was just standing there, still as a statue, watching. First, I thought she was just another customer, someone taking a break from the madness. But as the minutes ticked by, she didn't move. She didn't reach for a toy or step aside when customers bumped into her. She just stood there, her head tilted slightly, as if she were observing the chaos with some kind of grim amusement. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, forcing a smile as I approached her. She didn't respond. Her face was partially hidden by the hat, but I could see her lips curve into a faint smile. It wasn't a warm smile, it was cold, detached, like she was in on a joke the rest of us didn't understand. "Ma'am," I tried again. "Do you need help?" She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of her eyes. They were dark, too dark, as if they absorbed the light around them. A chill ran down my spine, and I stumbled back a step. The woman let out a small, breathy laugh, barely audible over the noise of the crowd. Before I could say anything else, a customer bumped into me, and I turned to apologize. When I looked back, she was gone. I searched the aisle, weaving between customers, but there was no sign of her. It didn't make sense. The aisle was crowded, yes, but she hadn't walked past me, and there was no way she could have disappeared so quickly. Unease settled over me, but I shook it off. It was Black Friday. People came and went in the blink of an eye. At least, that's what I told myself. The rest of the shift passed uneventfully, until around 10 p.m., when the crowds began to thin. I was in the toy aisle again, picking up boxes of discounted dolls that had been knocked to the floor, when I heard it, a soft laugh, echoing from somewhere nearby. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The laugh wasn't playful or cheerful. It was low, almost guttural, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I turned, expecting to see the woman in black standing at the end of the aisle, but there was no one there. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. No response, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of Christmas music playing over the intercom. I shook my head and bent down to pick up another doll, telling myself I was imagining things. But as I reached for the box, it slid across the floor, as if someone had kicked it. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The laughter came again, louder this time, and I felt a cold draft sweep through the aisle. Even though there was no air vent nearby, I grabbed my walkie-talkie, my hands shaking, and called for security. When the guard arrived, I told him what had happened. He nodded, his face pale. "You're not the first person to say something like that," he muttered. "What do you mean?" I asked. He hesitated, glancing around the aisle. "Last year, same time, same place, some of the employees said they saw a woman in black, just standing there, watching. She didn't talk, didn't buy anything, just disappeared when they tried to approach her." I swallowed hard. "And the laughter?" He nodded. "That too. We decided to check the security footage, just to be sure." As we watched the grainy black and white video, I felt my stomach twist into knots. There she was, standing at the end of the toy aisle, motionless. Customers walked past her without a second glance, as if they didn't even see her. But the footage showed something else, something that made my blood run cold. As I approached her, my lips moving in what must have been my attempt to talk to her, she tilted her head, her face turned toward the camera, and for a brief second, her eyes seemed to glow, a faint, unnatural light. Then, as I turned to speak to the customer who bumped into me, she vanished. One frame she was there, the next she wasn't. The guard and I stared at the screen, neither of us speaking. Finally, he shook his head and muttered, "I'm not paid enough for this." The rest of the shift was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I turned around, I expected to see her standing there, her dark eyes boring into mine. I didn't work Black Friday the following year. In fact, I transferred to a different store altogether. But I still think about that night, about the woman in black and the cold laughter that seemed to follow her. I've heard rumors since then, stories from other employees, other stores. They've seen her too, always on Black Friday, always in the toy aisle. Some say she's a ghost, the spirit of a mother who lost her child in a shopping frenzy years ago. Others think she's something darker, something that feeds on the chaos and desperation of the busiest shopping day of the year. I don't know what she is. I'm not sure I want to know. But if you ever find yourself shopping on Black Friday, and you see a woman in black standing at the edge of the toy aisle, don't approach her. Don't try to talk to her. Just walk away. And whatever you do, don't laugh. She doesn't like competition. And there you have it. For spine-tingling stories that turn the chaos of Black Friday into something far more sinister. These tales remind us that sometimes, the scariest part of shopping isn't the crowds or the competition for deals, but the unseen and unexplained lurking in the shadows. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will send shivers down your spine. Have you experienced anything unusual while shopping? Share your story in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the scariest bargains come at a price.